Today we are going to be featuring our Neuroscience Certificate with a mini lecture on functional neuroanatomy of the human brain, led by our faculty lead in the Neuroscience Certificate and the Neuroscience 1000 instructor, Dr. Michael Kane, who is here with us today. So the goal of today's session is really to give you a sense as to what kinds of content you can expect to learn in the certificate. And after the lecture, we are going to take a brief moment just to go over the certificate more broadly, Penn LPS Online a little bit more broadly. And for any of you here who might be a prospective student, we're also going to take a brief moment to go over basic program information such as the application deadline, start turns, etc. And so with that, I'm going to invite my colleagues to briefly introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie Kelly, and I am the Director of Certificates and Non-Degree Programs at the College of Liberal and Professional Studies. I oversee the Penn LPS Online certificates, and I'm thrilled to be here today. Michael?
Hi, my name is Michael Kane. I'm a senior lecturer in the undergraduate neuroscience program at Penn. I'm also the faculty liaison for the LPS uh, online program in neuroscience, and I am the instructor for the Introduction to Neuroscience course within our program. Thank you for having me today.
And you've heard me speak already, but my name is Christina Terosian, and I am the academic advisor for the Neuroscience Certificate. So we have a lot to get covered today. So with that, and I just realized I didn't click next on my lovely PowerPoint here. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Michael Kane, and I'll let you take over from here.
Oh, thank you for passing the over to me. All right, so what I'm going to do here today is just to give you a brief lecture on entitled The Functional Neuroanatomy of the Human Brain, and it's designed to give you a feel for the type of material that we cover in the Introduction to Neuroscience course, which is the gateway course for all other courses within our certificate program in neuroscience. So when we talk about the functional neuroanatomy of the human brain, what we're going to do is just talk about the different brain regions, some of the structures within those brain regions, and the processes that those regions control. Let's see if I can. Next slide, please, Christina. So first, we want to talk about the human cerebral cortex. So what we see on the screen here is typically what people think of as the human brain, and you can see on this image right here, we divide the human cerebral cortex into four major lobes, and the lobes are actually named for the skull bones that lie above them. So we have the frontal lobe, which is pictured here in blue. We have the parietal lobe pictured here in green. We have the occipital lobe pictured here in this pinkish color, and then we have the temporal lobe in orange, and then not labeled, but on the back of the brain is this structure called the cerebellum, and we'll also talk about the function of the cerebellum. So one of the things that you should notice when you look at a human brain, it's very wrinkly, and these actually have technical terms, and they're called gyri, which are the individual folds of the brain, and that's what you would see when you're looking at across the surface of the brain. And then you have the little fissures that lie between those gyri, and those fissures are called sulci. And if we then were to look within the cortex and kind of open up the brain, we would actually see that there's a lot of fluid in the brain, and these fluid-filled cavities are called ventricles, and the ventricles are filled with fluid that is called cerebral spinal fluid. And this has important implications for maintaining brain health. Next slide, please, Christina. So first, what we want to look at is the cerebral cortex, and what we're going to do is evaluate what are called structure-function relationships. So we're going to look at the several different regions of this cortex, and we're going to talk about some of the functions that they control. So overall, the cerebral cortex is this large structure that encompasses all the four major lobes, and if we try to talk about one single function that the cerebral cortex does, that would be really hard. It does so many different things. So as you can see on the screen, we try to break it down a little bit, and we say that cerebral cortex is the seat of perception, cognition, consciousness, and voluntary action. And that's a lot of different things. And this is why we have to subdivide this cortex into a number of different regions. So within the frontal lobe in blue, we can actually see in this darker blue area, we see what is called the primary motor cortex. And this is a region that is really important in controlling voluntary muscle movement. So if you want to reach towards an object or take a step towards something or avoid an object, all of these actions would be initially controlled by this primary motor cortex. Then, if we look, what we say just posterior to the primary motor cortex, you can see in this reddish um, color over here, we have what is called the primary somatosensory cortex. And this is actually located in a different lobe called the parietal lobe, one of the four major lobes. And in terms of the primary somatosensory cortex, this is responsible for all the sensations of touch, pain, temperature, and itch. So all of that information that comes in from the entire body is going to be processed ultimately in this region here. Then if we go into the temporal lobe, in green, we have what is called the primary auditory cortex, and this is what gives rise to the sensation of hearing. So all information that enters through the ear, which is our primary sense organ, is going to be funneled and transferred all the way up into this primary auditory cortex. And then if we go into the occipital lobe in the way back, with this pinkish purplish color, we see pointed out here, we have the primary visual cortex, and this is where all visual information comes from. Comes in and into the brain and is processed. And so you might imagine the sense of vision is mediated by our eyes. The eyes send all of that information into this visual cortex for processing. And then another region I wanted to point out within the frontal lobe is what is known as the prefrontal cortex. And this is a very large region indicated by the notation prefrontal association cortex. And this is a very an enlarged region in primates and in humans in particular. And this has a number of functions. You can see listed here, we talk about the prefrontal cortex is critical for decision making, planning of actions, evaluating strategies. And in a number of psychiatric disorders, including schizophrenia as well as ADHD, this area may be impaired in its function. Next slide, please. So now what we want to do is move from the outer cortex down into the brain, and we call this region the diencephalon. And so you can see in the image to the right, what we've done here is basically split the brain down the middle and opened it up. And we're going to focus on two structures which are the thalamus and the hypothalamus. And the thalamus, you can see, is located below the cortex, which is colored in the blue, pink and purple here. And you can see the thalamus, this is known as the gateway to the cortex. And we call this a gateway to the cortex because most sensory information that comes in from the eyes, from the ears, as well as from the skin, is going to relay through this thalamus before it gets sent into those cortical areas that we just spoke about. And another region in this diencephalon that is critically important for homeostasis within the body is the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is located just below the thalamus, and you can see where it is indicated on this image right here. And you can see the number of different functions this teeny tiny brain region controls. And this is why it's a really important brain region. You can see it's important for regulating body temperature, saltwater balance, hunger, thirst, energy metabolism, reproductive behaviors, as well as emotional responses. That's why I put few, because that's a lot of things that this little structure does. In addition, it also is responsible for regulating circadian rhythms. So that would be the idea that humans should sleep at night and be awake during the day, and that is our daily rhythms. That is a particular region of the hypothalamus known as the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The hypothalamus also controls other regions of the body, including the entire autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is part of what we call the peripheral nervous system, and that contains in it the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, which some of you may be familiar with when we talk about the fight or flight response, as well as the rest and digest response. Those are mediated initially by the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus also controls the stress response in the body. So there's a lot of things that this region controls in order to maintain homeostasis, or this kind of normal state and normal balance in everyday life. Next slide, please. So now if we then go a little bit deeper into the brain, we go into a region called the midbrain. And what you can see on the image to the right of the text on this slide, again, we've kind of cut the brain down the middle and opened it up, and now we're going deeper. And the images shows the numbers 4, and that shows a little line across it, and then there's the number 5 with a little line across it, and then to the right we see what is called a cross section of each of these brain regions. And there's a number of important structures within the midbrain, and they function to mediate a number of important processes. So in starting at the top, if we look at region 4 and the cross section through that region, we have two major structures called the colliculi. And this one of them is the superior colliculus right here, and this superior colliculus actually receives a lot of information from the eye. And then if we go down to the cross section of number 5, you can see the inferior colliculus, and here the information that comes to the inferior colliculus is coming from the ear. So we have auditory information relayed through here. Um, and then another important region that I want to draw your attention to is the tegmentum. So the tegmentum is imaged on the bottom right. It's kind of hard to see. And it contains um, the structure called the substantia nigra, as well as the red nucleus. And the substantia nigra literally means black substance, and it's colored here green, so it's a little bit of an anomaly. But we call it the substantia nigra because on gross dissection, if we were to just dissect the brain out fresh and cut through this region of the midbrain, we would open it up and we would see a very black looking substance. And this region is important because this contains the cell bodies of what are called the dopamine neurons. And in Parkinson's disease, it is these dopamine neurons in the substantia nigra that degenerate over time and give rise to the clinical symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And then up on the top image, you can also see the red nucleus. The red nucleus, also named because on gross dissection it has a very red color, and that has to do with the cells and the pigments that they contain. And this red nucleus is important because of its role in controlling voluntary movement via what is known as the rubrospinal tract. Next slide, please. And last, we can talk about the hindbrain structure-function relationships. So if we look to the image on the images to the right, you can see that again we've taken we've cut the brain down the middle, we've opened it up, and we're going to look at a section, a cross-sectional image indicated in number 6, and as well as by the number 7. The cross-sectional image through number 6 contains what we call the pons, as well as part of the cerebellum. And the cerebellum is that large structure sitting on the back of the brain. The pons is an important region because that literally means the bridge. And the pons is a region where information comes in and out of the cerebellum. And we'll see that the cerebellum, which is known as the little brain, as you can see to the left, is really important in the coordination of movements. And the cerebellum is going to receive information from the spinal cord, and it's also going to receive information from the cortex via this pons, and it's going to then specify goal-dependent movements. And we know that the cerebellum is important for coordination of motor movements because when it is damaged, we have a clinical syndrome called ataxia. If we go down again to the number 7 cross-section down here, we see that that cross-section is below the pons, and this is in the region of the hindbrain, which we call the medulla. And the medulla, also known as the medulla oblongata, is really important for a number of functions because there are a number of centers in this medulla that control key aspects of life. So we have a heart rate center, one that controls the rhythmic beating of the heart. We have a respiratory center that controls rhythmic breathing movements. We have blood pressure centers. We have a cough reflex center. We also have a vomiting reflex center, all located within this medulla. So very important and for maintaining normal function of the body. Next slide, please. So the overall key message is that all of these systems, from the cortex through the diencephalon, through the midbrain and the hindbrain, are working in parallel all the time to maintain homeostasis and to allow us to have the perception of the world that you see today on an everyday basis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kane. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge, I know we have some questions in the chat. We are going to have time at the end to address some questions, so we'll save that toward the end. For right now, we're just going to take a very brief moment to kind of go over PanLPS at large and the Neuroscience Certificate in general. So the Neuroscience Certificate is one of many certificate areas we have available. So we do have 13 certificates, and you are welcome. If you're a current student, you're welcome to take courses across certificate areas. If you're a prospective student, the same applies. You're welcome to pursue multiple certificate areas or take individual courses which interests you. We do have a course guide available online, which allows you to view the course schedule for any given term. So you are welcome to use that to help you decide whether there's a course upcoming that you are interested in taking. Um, for the neuroscience certificate specifically, you are, and I know Dr. Kane mentioned this earlier, but just to re-emphasize, you are required to begin with Neuroscience 1000. It's required as part of the certificate. It is also, again, the introductory course. Once you complete that introductory course, you are welcome to take any three additional neuroscience courses which interest you to be eligible for the certificate. And you also do need to obtain a GPA of 2.5 or higher. So for the Neuroscience 1000 course specifically, if you're looking ahead at starting the certificate in the spring, you do have to, again, begin with Neuroscience 1000, which is only a spring one course. And I'll talk a little bit about our term structure in a moment. But the Neuroscience 1000 class also has a required pre-course assessment, which is going to open up about a month before the class begins. So again, if you're a prospective student interested in the certificate, just make sure to keep an eye on your pen email for instructions on how to participate in this. One extra note, I did mention you're able to take any three additional courses other than Neuroscience 1000, which interest you. If you are specifically interested in our psychopharmacology course, which is Neuroscience 4000, it is traditionally offered in the summer. That is the only course we have which has an additional prerequisite. So you would need to take Neuroscience 1000 and Neuroscience 2800, Autonomic Pharmacology, which is a Spring 2 course. All of that to say, Neuroscience 1000 is the prerequisite to all other courses. Neuroscience 4000 is the only class that has one extra prerequisite required. And I know we already have some questions in the chat, so I'll pass it over to my colleague, Jamie.
Thank you, Christina. So first, there was some a little bit of discussion around this question, Dr. Kane. And this question says, from a neuroscientific perspective, how do you determine the difference between disorder or problem and simply different? You mentioned for ADHD and schizophrenia that the area of the brain may have issues. I'm just wondering what defines it as an issue versus a difference. Thank you.
This would be a question for a clinician to answer more appropriately, as this refers to diagnostic criteria. But generally speaking, there are diagnostic criteria that are defined in what is called the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association, which is generally used by most clinicians, therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists to provide diagnostic or diagnoses for different psychiatric disorders. So there would be a list of clinical features, and an individual would have to meet criteria for a certain number of those features to be diagnosed with a specific disorder. But generally speaking, there would be a variability among different brain regions and and the function, even amongst the, people that are not diagnosed with the disorder. So there's considerable variability overall in these brain regions in terms of function, I guess you could say.
And then another student was asking if the diagnostic was open for the Spring 1 Neuroscience 1000 course. I'm imagining not quite yet. It's not a month ahead. Michael, do you by any chance know?
The course did get published the other day.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so the um, it is up on Canvas, and the pre-course diagnostic is available for taking.
Great. And I just want to add to that that you need to be registered for the course. You need to be a student and registered for the course to see the diagnostic in Canvas. Um, I want to hand this next question over to Christina. We have someone asking about the different titles of classes that are available. Would you want to maybe share your screen and show those classes?
Absolutely. Okay,
Oh,
give me
great.
one moment. I actually just put it in the chat as well. Um, okay. So this is our neuroscience certificate page, and this is just for all of your reference, but we do have all of the classes listed here. So this is the introductory course that I mentioned earlier, and just for reference, the psychopharmacology course, which has that other prerequisite I was referencing. But you're welcome to click through all of these. Each of these individual pages will have a course description, um, require textbook information, and when the courses will be held. So I hope this is helpful.
And another question, potentially for Dr. Kane, but I think any of us could potentially answer this, which is, are the classes and tests asynchronous?
Yes. So for the most part, the lectures are pre-recorded lectures that you would then watch on a weekly basis. They would be released on a weekly basis, and then um, the course material, which could involve online quizzes, online discussion boards, as well as online exams, or even online presentations, depending upon the course, are all done in an asynchronous manner.
Thank you. And then we have someone that previously registered for Neuroscience 1000, but in the recorded lecture, it talked about that it was a challenging course and they got nervous and dropped. And so they want to know, is this math heavy? Is this difficult? How would you define this, Dr. Kane?
You're they're referencing my introductory video, I'm assuming, in that on the course site. So it's a challenging course in that it's a time-consuming course. Neuroscience and introduction to neuroscience, just like other biological sciences, requires a lot of effort to take in the material, review the material, and learn the material. It's not a math-heavy course. There are You will be required to do some very basic calculations, which is actually just a subtraction during the very first part of the course to get at one particular point about how ions move. The pre-course diagnostic does go through quite a bit of basic math, chemistry, physics, but that really is to try to provide a foundation of learning. But the course itself does not involve a lot of math, but it's just one that involves a lot of time on a weekly basis. And I put that in the introductory video because I want people to understand that right away. It's not something that you can just watch the videos and do well with, or because of the amount of material. We do say it's a several hour a week commitment. Um, but you certainly get a lot out of those hours. I think people ultimately enjoy the course quite a bit. And again, we're trying to build a foundation for the remainder of the program. So you need to have that solid foundation in all aspects of neuroscience in order to jump into the next set of courses, which build upon that foundation.
Thank you so much. And I want to add that if you go to the Neuroscience Certificate page, that Christina shared, and you click on Neuroscience 1000, at the bottom of the page, yep, there's a section here, Preparing for Neuroscience 1000. If you are feeling nervous about jumping into the certificate, we provide some sample questions from the diagnostic and some free resources, as well as classes you can take at Penn to prepare for those classes. So definitely take a look at that. It will make you ideally more confident that you're ready to take these classes. And we also received questions about the tuition and fees. And I saw, Christina, that you did respond to one of those questions in the chat. Just generally, this is a 4-course certificate. Each course is one course unit at the University of Pennsylvania, which is equivalent to 4 credit hours. So it's basically a 16 course certificate and, sorry, 16 credit, my apologies, certificate. And then there was a question. Someone in learning design was curious if this certificate might be helpful to them. I don't know, Dr. Kane, if that's something that you've seen in students before, that they're in the learning design field. I mean, I assume that if you're trying to understand how someone navigates a course and experiences, the information provided in a course site, if it's an online course, that it might be helpful to understand the brain better. Yeah, I'm curious.
Yes, I would agree. I mean, we're providing a foundation for understanding how the brain functions. So if you are trying to engage people in a particular manner through learning design, it would certainly be beneficial to understand, I think, how the behind the scenes processes within the brain are working as an individual sees, hears, processes information. So yeah, I think it certainly would be beneficial in that way.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to give this next question to Christina because you are the academic advisor for the Neuroscience Certificate. So maybe the next two questions, but someone is asking from a therapist perspective, and I know we get a large number of therapists that are interested in the certificate, but also someone pursuing advanced work in psychology or medicine, like a physician's assistant, MD, career path. Um, would this certificate potentially be helpful to those individuals?
We do have, I know Jamie just said this, but we do have a number of people who work as therapists, social workers, counselors, et cetera, or, client-facing fields who do pursue the certificate. We hear from those students a lot that it really gives them a great foundation on on like neuroscience content on how to support their clients and understand it, the clients they're working with through that lens. I will say too that the introductory course tends to be most helpful for those candidates. It gives them again a great foundation, and it also helps you understand whether this is something that will continue to be helpful in your practice beyond the introductory course. So we do have a number of people pursuing that. Um, and again, it's really the certificate itself is very content heavy, so it gives you a greater foundation. And you as the clinician can continue to make those connections independently when you're working with clients. I don't know if that helps, but I see another question about who this might be most suitable for. And I would say, very generally speaking, it's suitable for candidates who find themselves working in fields where they potentially are supporting clients um, or are working in some capacity with neuroscience, but have not had that academic background. So again, this provides them with that content foundation. And I do see the time, it's 2 o'clock. Um,
And we don't have additional questions either.
Excellent. So I want to again thank everyone for joining. I am going to stop the recording here. Thank you so much to my colleagues, Dr. Kane and Jamie.